And there we are. We are live. How you feeling today, Tommie?
I feel fantastic.
That's good. That's good. I'd like to hear that. What's the weather like? You're in Brooklyn, right?
Oh yeah, the sun is shining, as you can see.
Yes.
It is upon me, and yeah, no, it's a bit of it's a hazy day, but it's a nice day, and my birthday's tomorrow, so
That's right.
this is a festive week.
Happy birthday. You're turning, can I say?
Oh, I'll say I'm 50 tomorrow. Like,
That's a milestone, man. That's huge.
uh, you know, there were things about it that I thought would be anxiety inducing. But when all is said and done, like you know, it's I've been around for a long time, and I'm extremely happy to still be doing exactly what I want to be doing. It's been 21 years since I've had a boss, so come on, like I'm living the dream.
Yeah, you can't really complain about that. Not having to answer to anybody but yourself and your wife is not a bad deal.
No, no, not at all.
So yeah, let's get into it, man. I kind of want to talk to you about we're starting to emerge from a pandemic here. There's shows starting to be announced, some sooner than others, but there's some light at the end of the tunnel. So, what do you think dance music is going to look like on the other side of this?
Well, I mean, I think the live music side, like the artists who are, more electronic and do more performances. I feel like that kind of stuff is going to go back to venues and stuff like that. But I feel like the bulk of the dance music industry is going to go back to house parties and loft parties and warehouse parties. Like I see a rave scene coming that's infinitely, exponentially bigger than it was in the early 90s. And I think that, because of how rearranged this has all become, I don't see nightclubs paying DJs tens of thousands of dollars again. Like, I don't imagine that that's going to happen, and it might take years before that happens again.
Well, clubs don't even have the money to do that right now. They've all been closed for the last year and a half. So what you're saying is that we're going to move. I mean, we're still going to be an industry, but we're going to move back towards being a scene.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that was, one of the sacrifices of the EDM explosion was the inevitability that the culture got pushed aside.
Right.
And in order for things to be Forbesy and for, people to talk about the millions of dollars that people were making and the billions of dollars that the industry was making, like, part of that sacrifice is, you lose a lot of the culture. And to me, that's why I got into this. The most important part of this to me is the culture. That's what ultimately matters. I mean, I like to say I'm a raver, DJ, and producer in that order. Like, I have always been, I was on a dance floor for 6, almost 7 years before I ever thought to play records. So my perception of this has always been from a participant of the culture and from someone who understands deeply what it feels like to have a kick drum or a hi-hat change your life at 3 o'clock in the morning because of, however you're surfing the astral plane at that hour. Like, I've been there. I am not, there are producers now who have never stood in line in the rain to get into a nightclub to hear someone that they really like play records.
Right.
Like, they don't know what that is, that they're not connected to the culture in that way. And I think that, we're getting back to this moment where the culture is actually becoming more important. And I think that, that's exciting to me because, I want there to be kids all over this country and all over the world throwing raves. And my feelings aren't hurt if I'm not invited. Because you know what? Like when I was going to raves when I was a kid, there weren't any 50-year-old DJs playing those parties. And I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? Like I have a record label. I can soundtrack the culture. I can do all of the other things. Like my feelings are not hurt. Please, by all means, children, gather, freak out, have a great time, and do it on your own terms. You know what I mean? Like that's the part of it that, everyone always talks about plur and, the kind of, they kind of, try to, trivialize that ethos. And it's like, the biggest part of that for me is the respect part. And I respect the fact that, there's going to be a new incarnation of this. And I will be a part of it in as many ways as I am invited into it. Well, I'm all right with that.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of that, I think we've spoken before kind of about the life cycle of a dance music fan and how that's changed or how that's evolved over time. How do you feel? Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe talk about it in respect to the people that may have gotten missed in the last year? We've missed like an entire class of dance music fans. What's going to happen as a result of that?
2 already. I mean, if you think about it, right? Like, like the life cycle of someone in dance music is around 18 months. That's like a typical dance music fan.
Right.
And if you have an 18-month cycle, when those people graduate college, they get a job, they get married, they stop going out. There's always an incoming freshman class of, college freshman class of whatever year. Well, the freshman class of 2019 never got to go to Ultra, never got to go to EDC, never got to go to Coachella. So we missed 2019 and then we missed 2020. So it's already been 2 full classes. And it's not looking so great for 2021 either.
Oh, it's not.
So, potentially it could be not only 3 years of people cycling out, getting, I was saying, getting jobs and kind of moving on, but, now people are getting pregnant and they're having babies and they're doing all these other things that would prevent them from continued participation. Well, add that to 3 incoming classes that didn't happen. And all of those new fans still don't know what it's like to go to a festival, still have never been exposed to it. Their cool friend hasn't dragged them to one of these parties that they've never been to before, and they've never taken a hit of ecstasy, and they don't know what's going on. And I think that, we're going to have to do a fair amount of rebuilding as a culture to get all of this to continue. I mean, everyone thinks that like the minute they flip the switch, like everyone's going to come pouring back out. I disagree. I think people have gotten real used to sitting on their couch and getting, ordering in and Netflixing and, doing all the things that you do. Yeah. Like, people are not going to, there's some people are going to be really psyched to be around other people again, but there's plenty of people who are freaked out. So it's going to be a process. And I think, this is the best time to be an artist. Not to find like, the bright side of a global pandemic, but like, as an artist, there are no rules. There's no expectations. We can all do whatever the fuck we want to do for the first time in a decade. It's really, really great.
It really is. And let's talk about that for a second too. as an artist, I've spent the last year of my life making music, and I've probably made more music than I ever have in my life because I've had the time. I mean, I'm a freelancer. I lost my job shortly before the pandemic, but I've had all the time in the world besides having to homeschool a kid to make music. And what I've noticed is there's like a burgeoning underground scene, at least in house music, that of amazing artists that are like rearing and ready to take the place of some of the people that have been up there for a while. Um, as a record label owner, what does that look like for you? Like, how do you feel about seeing all of this young and maybe not so young talent, but all of this talent in general ready to hit the streets and just like seeing all of this music coming out right now?
Well, I mean, listen, like, this is such a moment where I think, we didn't have this before. We didn't have this kind of time to dig deeper. We didn't, I mean, guys, anyone who's out touring, is inherently distracted from producing.
Right.
Like you cannot be a prolific producer and tour. I'm sorry. Like, I mean, like, those are incongruent things. Like, all the photos of like producing on the plane and all that nonsense
that's not happening.
That's cute, but like,
Right.
like that's just not, that's not how your best ideas come to you. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
36C is not the location for, your best music. Like, that's just not how it goes. And it's
Really?
like, we now, one of the things I've really encouraged with the artists on Brooklyn Fire is to go to the absolute outer limits of your creativity, because there aren't any expectations now. So
Right.
because of that, there's this great situation where now we can get weird and we can make weird ambient records and release them on Brooklyn Blue, and we now have a sub label for Speed House Movement, and that higher tempo, stuff that House of Panda created. Now that has its own lane. And I'm just telling everyone, I'm like, listen, there's no record you could send to me where I would be like, you know what, this is too weird. Like, I don't know where this would fit. Well, I'm actually only looking for records that are unclassifiable. Like, I mean, we just released this record from this female artist in Seattle. Her name is Zoph, and
I love her.
And the record was submitted to Beatport as a techno record, and we had a good laugh about it because it's hardly a techno record, but in defense of it being categorized that way, I don't know what else it could be called. So I think it's a win when somebody makes something that confuses the distributor, confuses the curators, and like no one knows where to put it. That to me, I mean, that's dead center through the goalposts as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that's exactly what we all should be doing right now, because, in lieu of having nightclubs and in lieu of having, people to play the bangers, like, what is your ultimate like end game for dance music right now? Like,
Right.
Getting fill in the blank to play it on their live stream. Like, I don't know if that's like the best focus, for your creative ventures. Like,
No, I'm just trying to write good music that I like, and if everybody else likes it, that's fucking great. But really, like, I've spent the last year just writing music that I like, and I feel like that's what everybody else has done too.
You know what? Let me just speak to that for a second, because I think the only part of the whole equation that you have any control over as an artist and as a producer is the creation.
Yep.
Everything that happens once you're done with a track is out of your hands. You can't make people want to playlist it. You can't make people want to like it. You can't do any of that. The only thing that you have complete control and complete power of is how you create it. Right. And the only enjoyable, I mean, I keep telling everyone this, like the only enjoyable part of music making is creating it. Like when you're in the moment, when you're, you know, you're actually working on it, the moment you decide to, you know, take the dandelion and go and blow the seeds into the wind to see where they go, you know, everything that happens after that is out of your hands. And you have to make peace with that. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that, you know, one of the things, unfortunately, that some people get wrapped up in is, you know, they'll make a record and they'll be like, oh, but no one liked it. And I'm like, but hang on, did you like it? Is this the direction you want to go? If it is, then this is exactly how you should continue. Yeah. Do not listen to critics. Do not listen to, I mean, listen, I tell everyone, don't listen to anybody, including me. Like, you have to listen to yourself. Like, you are your own captain of your own ship. Like, the moment that you take other people's opinions and critiques of what you do artistically to heart, and you let that alter what you're doing, you become a craftsman. You are no longer an artist. Like,
well, there's something in that. Me and my wife listen to the speaker Terry Cole Whitaker all the time, and one of the best bits of advice that she ever gave was, what other people think of you is none of your business. And I think you really got to take that to heart as a music producer. And I kind of want to, like, you know, talk to you a little bit about like your role as a curator, because you've been doing that for quite a while, ever since your days at Xylophone Jones, when you signed an early record from somebody who became ultra famous. How have you been able to curate and be successful as an A&R and a curator for so long, and find all of these new avenues of discovering people?
Well, you know, it started being a DJ. You know what I mean? The DJ, you're always on the hunt, you know, and in the vinyl days, you know, if you didn't have a physical copy of the record, you couldn't play the record. You couldn't like duplicate it or give it to your friends or like make more versions. Like, you had to have the physical vinyl. And if you didn't have it, you couldn't play it. So the search was hot. Like, we were always digging for new things and exclusive things that no one else had. Well, then I did a stint for a couple years at Dust Tracks in Chicago and worked at a distributor which distributed about 20 record labels, like through house and techno. And we were dealing with Joey Beltram and Terry Mullen and Felix the House Cat and all these, you know, great Paul Johnson, all these great producers. And, you know, I did a lot of help picking records there. Then I started an imprint of my own called Xylophone Jones. Put a bunch of like electro clashy records out on Xylophone Jones. Then started a vinyl label of it through Europe that was XJREU. And I found this kid in 2005 on MySpace. I was on, you know, it was the very early blog days. And I remember reading on a blog that somebody mentioned this kid from Scotland. And I went to his MySpace page and I heard a couple songs and I reached out to him. And we used to talk over Skype before Skype had video.
Right.
So it was just audio. And we would have these conversations when he would get home from his like 20, you know, his like, you know, he worked like 12-hour shifts, stocking shelves at a grocery store in Dumfries, Scotland. And this kid was Calvin Harris. And, you know, I put out the first record that he made, and then put out another record of his, or signed another record of his. And then he got his deal with Columbia in the UK. And they had to buy, because he signed like a 3-record deal with my label. And they had to buy out his deal from my label and license that second track. There was a track called Vegas. Ironically enough, this kid wrote a song called Vegas, having never stepped foot in America, having never stepped foot in Vegas, and then went on to become the literal king of Las Vegas.
That's insane.
Yeah, no, totally wild. But that Vegas, that second record ended up on I Created Disco. And if you look in the liner notes of I Created Disco, there's thank you to Xylophone. It says that it's licensed from Xylophone Jones. I'm thanked in the credits of it, on his first record. Like, it's all there. And, you know, but I've always been looking for, you know, new things. Another funny story was, I remember coming across this German kid on SoundCloud, and he was making this really crazy music that was very different from what everyone else was doing. And I reached out to him and I was like, listen, I'm starting a new label called Brooklyn Fire. I would really love to put your music out. And he was like, this was on a Monday. And he was like, oh, on Friday, Skrillex just reached out to me, and this was Zed. So I missed Zed by like 3 days. And you know, and on Brooklyn Fire, like, we've had, you know, a lot of different people come through our ranks. I started the record label with Figure, who went on to be like a big bass guy. And on the first release, there's a song from TJR. And along the way, we've put out records from, we put out the first Bro Hug EP.
Oh.
We put out records from Mahalo and Jay Wara and all these great people who are now, you know, have now gone on to all of these kind of higher heights. And our label family now, House of Panda and you know, Bexy, who is exploding at the moment. She put out a record like 5 weeks ago, and it's well past 1 million streams on Spotify now. And, you know, we have this tight family, Faja and On Deck and Bitch Be Cool and yourself.
Thank you.
And Benoit and Breakthrough and all of these amazing artists who are all really exceeding my expectations in real time and constantly making new great things. And it's exciting because, you know, I'm a proud papa. I love to watch like these artists literally, like, you know, trump themselves and constantly do things that are better than what they previously did. And you know, it doesn't always work that way. You know what I mean? That's not every artist, you know, like you don't get to see growth like that with everybody. But I really encourage, you know, experimentation, and I encourage, you know, trying things that have never been done by said artists. And, you know, these experiments, you know, turn out pretty damn good.
Well, let's talk about that for a second too. And, you know, you talk about expanding and encouraging artists to experiment. And I feel like that's kind of resulted in you being able to expand Brooklyn Fire. You were just you spoke to Brooklyn Blue, and you also talked about Speed House. Can you talk a little bit about how Brooklyn Fire has expanded in the last couple of years and like started to encompass even larger swaths of dance music?
Well, you know, I mean, I always really wanted to do different stuff. And it's really funny. The artists who have put out the most music on Brooklyn Blue, they're called the Always People. And it's these two guys from California, and they're, you know, they're bandish guys who get together and do these like electronic, like live jams. And it's very like blurry, and it's very analog, and really, really, I love it. And they sent their first stuff to me in 2017. And I always wanted to figure out a way to put it out on Brooklyn Fire. I was like, oh, you know what? We'll do it at like Christmas time when there's like downtime, or we'll do it like in the middle of the summer when like all the labels take a break. And it just never felt right to put it on Brooklyn Fire. And then right around the time of the beginning of the pandemic, I was having these conversations with the Guidance and his manager, Jeremy Dawson, who is in Shiny Toy Guns and makes really incredible music. And, they were collaborating on a bunch of new stuff that was like, very, very analog synth driven, like, I guess you could call it ambient, very experimental and very indie. And Jeremy said to me, he was like, you should really start like a label for this like quarantine music. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Like everyone's going to be making these projects and doing these things. And, he was like, maybe, Brooklyn Fire. He's like, how about, you do something like Brooklyn Water? And I was like, no, that sounds horrible. I was like, what about Brooklyn Blue? And as soon as it came out of my mouth, it just like, that was it. Like that, we were all in on that name. And, we've put out, an EP from the Guidance that I'm really proud of. We've put out like 5 different records from the Always People now. There's an album from Who's John that's this really, really like insular, like tender emo, sad record that's really, really good. And then there's a guy that's featured on his album At Last, and he has an album coming.
Oh,
now.
Nice.
And there's there's a whole crew of there's probably about 5 or 6 other artists that have albums coming. That label, no singles, only full length or EP releases. Like I don't want to do singles on that label. I mean that's Brooklyn Fire's jam as singles. So right. I want it to be a bit different, and I want these projects to be a little more dug in. So Faja, who's probably at this point our most prolific artist, he has a side project that's simply Fa, and it's his more down-tempo experimental stuff, and we have 2 big EPs of his coming out on Brooklyn Blue as well. So it's this constant evolution of just like trying different things. And I just love to share great music with people. I mean, I think music is this wonderful thing. There's this alchemy that you can really only have with music that really brings people together. And in the absence of being able to physically gather, like, I love the idea of making music that can connect us all and can get people to like, it makes me happy when, like I mentioned before, the Bexy record that's hit, it's at like 1,200,000 streams now. Like a record like that gives joy. And I feel like as artists, we are joy providers. That is what we are. That's our role in the world. And if we can provide this joy, especially, I mean, I think right now as an artist, if you can give somebody an experience that takes them away from this, nightmarish hellscape that we've been involved in for the last year, right. If you can remove them for 3 or 4 minutes from that and take them somewhere else and give them a feeling of joy, they're never going to forget that. They're going to be a fan of yours for the rest of their life because they're always going to remember like that song on that one day when they were driving their car and they heard it and it just like swept them to some other place. And I think that, we live amongst great static, and to be able to pierce through that and make connections like this with people is really profound. And I think that these are going to be the lasting fans that people can make for the rest of their careers.
Well, it's kind of an interesting thing about the pandemic too, is that because everybody's had so much time to look inward, I feel like people have created more relationships in this time or strengthen those relationships in this time. And it's going to be interesting how that carries forward into what's coming next.
Well, I mean, you know, I have always really, I mean, as far as I've thought of the music business, you know, I think the important part of that has always been music business in that order,
Right.
not business music. And I think it's very easy to kind of tell like which side anybody's on.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you can really tell right away where somebody's coming from. Like you can hear it in the music.
Yeah.
You can definitely see it in their social media. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, if an artist only ever talks about product and content and never has like any personal opinions or feelings about anything that's going on in the world, like that is somebody who makes business music. Right. That is not somebody who's in the music business. Like
you're somebody who's a good example of that. Your social media is full of all kinds of amazing things, from music to activism to music to activism. Like it's great to see you interact with your social media followers, even the ones that don't necessarily agree with you all the time, but seem to keep coming back for more. Why is it that that's so important to you, that you have such a diversified amount of things that you speak about?
Well, I mean, it's just who I am. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a tactic. It's not, you know, activism is not my brand. No. That it's not like something I chose to be that way. Like you know, when I was younger, I was probably a lot less detached and I didn't really give a fuck. But as I got older, I started paying attention, and I started to see a lot of things that I didn't like. And it was, you know, Occupy Wall Street was like the first thing that really drew me in. And then when Mike Brown was shot in Ferguson, you know, I got pulled into the very, very bedrock beginnings of Black Lives Matter. And, you know, Daniela and I, my wife, were going to Black Lives Matter protests that had barely 50 people at them. And we were marching through the streets, and we felt like we needed to be there. Like it was it was something that felt important and urgent.
Yeah.
And it took the rest of this country 6 years to catch up with that. You know, it was only last summer that like it really started to stick.
Yeah.
And at all points during those 6 years, we were constantly out in the streets for this and that and the other thing. And then another big kind of lane that popped up in the midst of all of that was Standing Rock. And that was very important to me. I feel very, very strongly about what's, you know, I say what's going on there because it's a continuing struggle.
Right.
But, you know, I think what this country has done to Native Americans is you know, absolutely abhorrent and disgusting. And I think that, you know, I had this moment. I mean, this is kind of, there's two, I'll speak to this because I think it's important. And I don't necessarily get there's not a lot of venues that will give me, you know, the time to speak to this.
Yeah,
but there were two moments that really kind of took me away and made it so that like I would kind of never not do this. And one was, you know, talking about Standing Rock. There was the climate march in DC, and it was like on a spring day. It was unusually hot. I remember getting sunburned, and it was like April. It was like very bizarre, but like it was this beautiful day in DC, and a friend of mine, Doug, he actually spent a lot of time at Standing Rock. I think he went like 4 or 5 times, and he knew all of the elders and knew, like, you know, all of the Native Americans who were there from Standing Rock. And he was like, let's go up to the front. And I was like, are you sure? Like, I don't, only if they want us there. I'm like, I don't want to like bum rush the front of the march. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they were like, no. We would like you to be here with us. And I was with like all of the elders of Standing Rock that were there. And we were marching. And there was this moment where these young kids were drumming. And all of these women were dancing around, and the drumming was going, and they were chanting. And I'm getting goosebumps as I'm telling this story. And I remember at this one point, I just started to cry because it was just this incredibly powerful feeling. And I was like, these people have been here so long before anyone who looked like me stepped foot on this continent. And these chants and this music comes from then. Like this has not been modified. These are not fresh beats. These are the same chants that have been chanted for many hundreds of years. And it was nothing short of psychedelic. I mean, like I had a full-blown psychedelic experience amongst all of these Native American elders and all of this chanting. And I was like, this is exactly where I need to be. There is no other place on earth that I need to be other than standing right here fighting this fight. Like, and it just like, I mean, not that I didn't know it before, but it was like crystal clear. And there was a moment that actually happened before that. And my wife and I did a march. It was on MLK Day. And we marched from 125th Street in Harlem to the United Nations. And at one point, the Zulu Nation, like, the whole organization that Africa Bambaataa, Planet Rock put together, these kids from the Zulu Nation carted in a sound system on wheels. And they were playing all Martin Luther King Jr. speeches as we were marching through the streets, like at like blistering volume, so you could hear it for blocks through Manhattan. And hearing his voice kind of fuel this march was really, really powerful. And there was a moment where we paused and we did a die-in front of Macy's, like somewhere in Midtown, where we took this massive intersection and everybody just dropped to the ground and just clogged up the intersection for 10 minutes. And when we stood back up to march again, the first piece of music began to play, and it was Glory by Common and John Legend. And I had never really paid much attention to that song until this moment. But as this song was playing, there was a woman standing next to me who was a good 20 years older than I was. And she was an older African-American lady. And at multiple times during the playing of this song, she was standing with her hand in the air, and she just kept, like, at the top of her lungs saying, like, Alleluia, Alleluia. And, like, I mean, I'm getting emotional about it now because it's upsetting to me that there are so many people in this world that don't understand struggle.
Yeah.
They've never struggled a day in their life. And I'm not saying I have, because I haven't. Like, I just have empathy, deep, deep empathy. And I understand that there are people whose lives are unfathomably difficult. And it's just as simple as because of the color of their skin. And that just seems so fucked up to me. And that is why I fight. That is what gets me out into the streets. That is what fuels this. Like, I just want to see a better world. I have fought my entire life for a better world, whether that's through music or through activism or through social media or whatever, all of it goes back to a single thing. And that's just waking people up and trying to make things better than they are. Because Lord knows things are fucked up.
Right. Right. Well, let's talk about that too, because you mentioned through music and through social media, but dance music in its inception was a political statement. And I remember, actually, I want to take you back. The first time I actually got to speak to you was I did an interview with you for Magnetic Mag, and the premise of that piece was dance music. Is there a place for activism within dance music? And I kind of want to pose the question to you again. Where does that fit in? Is dance music, even with all of the hedonism of EDM, is it still a political movement? And is there still place within dance music for that?
I mean, listen, there are people who are very present in this fight.
Yeah.
Seth Troxler,
yeah,
the Blessed Madonna, Lauren Flax, Must Die. Like there's a really small group of people who are unafraid and really let the fire hose go on these topics. But it's minute. It's less than 1% of the people who do this, because people are worried about brand preservation. They're worried about alienating fans and promoters, and they don't want to lose money, and they're looking, they're worried about their bank accounts. They're not worried about like the statements that they make. And I happen to believe that if you don't have opinions, like, I'm not interested in your music if you don't have anything to say. Like, yeah. I'm sorry. Like, when I, come around to people's music, I go look on their social media, and, if somebody has nothing to say about anything, whether it, and sometimes, activism doesn't necessarily have to be like, hey, here's what's going on in Syria. Like, it can be just participating in dance music culture and making sure that there's representation in dance music culture. That's plenty. You know what I mean? Like, we have enough problems in just dance music to focus on just that.
Oh,
like,
yeah, there's a lot to talk about there.
And for some people that's as far as it goes. But that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, they're still participating. Like, it's still a big part of it. But I mean, one of the, I won't mention who it was, but one of the biggest curators at one of the streaming platforms came to me and said, besides yourself, what is the list of people who are DJs / producers in this business who are, full on activists? And I was like, I don't know what to tell you, man. I can't, that list is not for me to make. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what everyone's motivation is. I don't know what everyone's center of gravity is. I know what mine is.
Right.
And I share mine. And, I hope that, people can look at my Twitter feed because they like a song of mine and go, wait, there's a protest in India and the farmers in India are gathering by the millions in the streets. I didn't know anything about that. Like, no one knew anything about that until Rihanna tweeted about it. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, the activists were tweeting about that, but the world at large didn't know about that until Rihanna was like, hey, I'm putting this out into the world. And good on her, because it drew a ton of attention to it.
Right.
And, but listen, it's not a brand. I don't think of it as that. Like, I'm not involved in activism, for the gram. That's not why I do it.
Well,
You know what I
wouldn't
mean?
be
Like,
that wouldn't be activism. That's just doing
correct.
stuff for the look, and
Right.
that's not how we do it.
Right. And I mean, and it's like, and these things are deeply important to me. I mean, it is, it's as important to me as music. I mean, I can say that very, very simply. Like, I mean, and anyone who knows me knows how much I love music.
Yeah.
Like, house music saved my life. I mean, full stop. Like, there's nothing, my allegiance to electronic music runs deep as fuck. But my allegiance to activism is just as deep. It is an equal playing field in my mind. They are both as important to me.
Well, I think it's interesting that people think that in the music industry you have to be this one note person, that you have to be, it's all in or it's nothing. You have to just be about the music. And there's people like yourself or some of the people that you mentioned, like Must Die or Danny Deal or anybody else who's not just a one note person, that you really start to get a sense of who they are based on what they talk about. And I think that for me is more important than, above all else, is that I know who I'm talking to. That's why I have this show, because I want to have people on and talk to them and find out who they are. I don't want to just shoot the shit about music. I want to find out who I'm talking to.
Well, and you know what? I mean, here's the funny thing. Like, if you look at Brooklyn Fire, and Brooklyn Fire is a great kind of litmus test of this. And, and then going into, what Panda has done with Speed House Movement, like, he has these Speed World, like, live streams, and it's like on every day of the live stream, there's at least one female DJ. Like, there's at least someone from the LGBTQ community. There's people from all over the world, like, all colors of the rainbow, like, like from literally everywhere. And it's not that he's trying to do that. Right. And I'm not trying to do that with Brooklyn Fire either. I mean, but to me, some of the most interesting music that's come through my inbox in 2021 is from female producers.
Yeah.
And to me, that's really exciting to have, like, all of these different people at the table. Everyone is included. And it's, I didn't go searching for this. Like, that was not the intent. It was like, oh shit, it's 2020. We better get all inclusive. You know what I mean? Like, that was never the drive. But, EDM brought this, backwards baseball cap bro sitting in his gaming chair, like making hot jams to the table. And that was good for a decade, but that, it's good that that's over. And it's nice to see women at the table. It's nice to see LGBTQ folks at the table. It's nice to see, everyone from all over at the table. It's time. It's long overdue.
Absolutely.
And like I've been telling all the female artists, I'm like, listen, there's a touch that you bring to music that no man could ever create. And there's a nuance to that that's incredible. Like,
yep.
Like having that fresh perspective really takes house music to another place. And, not saying that there haven't been female house producers in the past, there have, but they were few and far between. And it's nice to see those numbers growing. And it's nice to see records. I mean, this Bexy record that we put out is the most successful in real time record that Brooklyn Fire has ever released. We've never had a record that hit 1 million streams in 5 weeks. That's never happened before. Not even anything of mine. And I have no qualms saying that. I am so proud of her. And I know I've heard all of these upcoming records of hers. I know how much bigger these records are going to be.
Yeah.
And it's so incredibly exciting to see this journey. And I tell everybody this, right? Like, as an artist in the music business, you know, it's a roller coaster. And as you know, the best part of a roller coaster is that first climb.
Yeah.
And you have no idea what's coming. And then once you get to the top and you go and things lock in, things are not the same. You don't have the same kind of control. You don't have the same kind of freedom. You don't have all the things that you have on the come up. The come up is the glory days. That's the best part of this. I mean, like, you know, not that I haven't enjoyed the other, you know, almost 30 years like that since, but you know, like it's this ramp up that is the part that you have to most enjoy, because you never get that back. You never get that kind of freedom back. Like, and I think that's, I mean, you know, you can continue. I mean, listen, I suppose I'm a good example of this. I mean, I've never dug my feet in and said, like, I'm this kind of producer and I'm never going to make anything else but this. And you know, I have never been a purist. Like, I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, even in the rave days, it was like, okay, I want to hear techno for an hour. And then it was like, all right, let's go in the drum and bass room. And then we'd go like freak out to drum and bass for a while. And then we'd go to the ambient room. And then it was like, you know, I wanted to hear all of the things, because I have always been a fan of all of the things. And I think that, you know, I mean, you know, to my career's detriment, I've always constantly done new things. And it's always been hard to keep tabs on me. You know, like I could have latched on to multiple things over the last 30 years, which would have, you know, been better for my bank account and would have put me on the road for longer and would have put me in more mainstream nightclubs and would have been a different journey for me. But I would have hated every stitch of that, because I've only ever done what I wanted to do. And I've stuck by that. And here I am turning 50 tomorrow, and I'm still doing whatever the fuck I want.
That's a beautiful thing, man. I mean, there's a lot of power in being able to do whatever you want. And you give us good advice for producers. But as a label owner too, what do you say to people that are wanting to start a label in such a like complicated climate of dance music or in anything? Like, what's your advice to people that are saying, I want to get out there and be the curator?
I mean, running a record label is not easy. I would never lie to anyone and tell them that it is. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's not the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's definitely not the easiest. And, you know, I mean, having your own record label only makes sense when you have a fan base to support it. If there's a fan base that is dedicated enough to what it is that you're doing, that can fund said venture, then it's worth doing that. But if you just want to have a label to have a label, you're going to have a tough time. Like, I mean, you know, you have the curators are dealing with so many people, and first of all, you have to know who they are. Then you have to develop relationships with them. And then you have to send them music that's superior to everything else that they're hearing. And those are a lot of steps. I mean, that sounds like, oh, okay, 1, 2, 3. Well, it's not. I mean, I'm leaving out 80 steps in between. But like, you know, like it when you're getting started, the best thing you can do is align yourself with record labels that are established so that they can help seed you as an artist. Yeah. And then once you get to the point where you have people's attention and you're getting consistent, you know, feedback from people and you're getting consistent love on your records, then you can think about something like that. But I mean, like, if you just start a record label to have a record label, like, don't expect that to reach anybody, because there's never been a moment where there's been more competition. I mean, that's just a fact.
Absolutely.
And to reflect back on what I said earlier, now there's more record labels than there's ever been. There's more producers than there's ever been. And there's never been a moment where there's been such a deficit of fans.
Oh, God.
Because we lost
Yeah.
we lost all of the people that evolved out of it. And then we never got the kids who were coming into it. So there's this kind of hole in the music at the moment. But there is a beautiful chance of being able to be a part of that and make yourself, part of the story that patches that hole. And if you align yourself with the right people, then there's an opportunity for you to come out of this in an elevated sense. But if you try to do it yourself, you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Well, I think that's a beautiful way for us to bring it back to where we started from, talking about the pandemic and this hole that existed because of it, and that we kind of have a bright future ahead of us for dance music. There really is something special that's going to evolve from this last hellish year that we've had. Yeah, I think that's a really great thing. I think we're really looking at a resurgence of making things special again.
I mean, to me, it never stopped being that. You know what I mean? Like I've always sought out the corners of this that were real,
right?
And whether that was the deepest house party, or whether it was a hard style warehouse party in Brooklyn with like kids on crazy drugs and bouncing off the walls, like I'm interested in whatever is true and real. And, bottle service was never that for me.
No, never that.
You know what I mean? Like that was always a step in the wrong direction. And I think that this moment is so important because we have all this freedom, and we can choose what to do with that freedom. As music lovers, as music makers, as label owners, as whatever perspective that you're coming at it from, like there has never been a moment where there has been more potential and more possibility as an artist, not necessarily like in the music economy. That's a whole other. I mean, that's another hour. But
right.
like as an artist, there has never been so much opportunity to really go to the end of the earth with creative possibility.
And on that note, what a wonderful way to end an hour of talking to an absolute fucking legend and my friend Tommie Sunshine, who is going to be turning 50 tomorrow. So I want everyone to wish him a happy 50th birthday. That's a fucking huge milestone. And it was fucking amazing having you here today. You spoke a lot of truth, and that's why I wanted to have you here.
Can I leave everybody with something?
Absolutely. Please do.
The most important thing in life is love. Like if you don't love what you do, you'll never be successful at it. If you don't love what you make, it will never connect. And if you don't love other people, you'll never have a good life. So you have to come to terms with the fact that the things that you do and the intent that you have in doing it has to be wrapped up in love. Because if it's not real. And if it's not real, who gives a shit?
True words have never been spoken. Thank you. I can't top that, man. Thank you so much. This is Tommie Sunshine. My name is Alex Amaro. I'm here every Thursday from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific, 4 to 5 Eastern. This is House Philosophy. Looks like we're going to be rating Artelon next with everybody. So everybody, enjoy your day. Thank you again, Tommie.
All power to the people.
All power to the people. See you next time.
Be good, brother.